It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All the sports news you need every day in under 20 minutes. Follow Locked On today on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts.
As the Pittsburgh Steelers resume practice on Monday after their preseason finale against the Panthers on Friday, they're getting ready to probably make some moves on the waiver wire. Which positions are the most important to be targeted by Kevin Colbert after the Steelers had an entire training camp and preseason to evaluate their players? I'll go over that right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. And remember, on the Locked On NFL podcast, we are previewing every team in every division with the help of Odyssey's lineup of NFL experts through September 8th. There are preview episodes on the feed that you can get to listen to right now by following the Locked On NFL Today on your Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts. Again, I'm Chris Carter here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things on the Pittsburgh Steelers. We're getting through it as always. Remember, if you want to subscribe to this show, you can get us on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Odyssey. You get us all different ways. If you rate us 5 stars with a positive comment on Apple Podcasts, you get a special shout out at the end of the show. Subscribing to our YouTube channel really helps as well. Now, let's get down to business, because the top thing I wanted to go over with you all is, everyone's going to be looking at, roster cuts. And we'll get to roster cuts in a minute. They've already made some. We'll address that in the second segment. But to me, the biggest concern now is the Steelers need to scope out and find where there might be a diamond in the rough amongst the waiver wire as teams are making these cuts. Now, for those who might not understand, as the NFL preseason comes to a close, everyone has until Tuesday, August 31st at 4 p.m. to announce their 53-man roster, which means all the guys that didn't make that roster, they then hit the waivers. Usually what happens is most of those guys go unclaimed by all the other teams in the NFL, and then they can get signed to the practice squad of the Steelers to keep them, with you so you can practice with them, call them up, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what the Steelers, have to do on their end, is make sure that a lot of their guys that they do cut don't get signed by other teams so that they can keep the ones that they want to keep around. But on the flip side, this gives you an opportunity to look at who you might be able to sign that other teams weren't able to keep. There's tough cuts all around. Everyone's looking at the Steelers and they're thinking like Matthew Sexton or, Cody White or some of those receivers that everyone was really excited about. Maybe there's a team that needs a fifth wide receiver and they're thinking, you know what, we could use a speedster like Sexton, or we could use a guy who flashed some playmaking ability like Rico Bussey. Those are the type of things that you can see. So what are those positions that the Steelers should target? Because it's kind of a waste of time to look at the waiver wire immediately and say, oh, they should go get this guy, because you never know who's going to come out. But it's important to look at what are the positions that the Steelers should target in the waiver wire. What I believe has jumped to priority is the offensive tackle position. Now, it was always something to keep an eye on. It was always something that you wanted to monitor. But everyone was more concerned with off-ball linebacker until they signed Joe Schobert. Everyone was more concerned about, the cornerback position, maybe the edge rusher position before they signed Melvin Ingram. But it's clear that offensive tackle is kind of that extra spot that we're talking about here. And why? Well, we haven't gotten to see too much greatness from the offensive tackles. Now, Zach Banner played 12 plays in the preseason. He looked good in doing them. If he's healthy and ready to go for the season, more power to him, and that's what you want to see out of Zach Banner. He'll be ready to go. If he's ready to go, that's right tackle. You got that locked down. But Chukwuma Okorafor did not look all that good in the preseason, just being frank with you. There were a lot of plays that he missed, times where you're like, ooh, that was bad, and he didn't really fill out there. Now, the Steelers still seem content with him at least being the guy over Dan Moore Jr. I know a lot of Steelers fans are like, what are you doing? It's Dan Moore Jr. He had a much better preseason than Okorafor. Again, I remind you, veterans, when you're going, it's different in the preseason when, in the preseason, Mike Tomlin says this all the time. Players do not, they're more focused on what their own assignments are, what their own game plan is, and less with what the other team is trying to do. But when you get to the regular season, every week there's a new game plan, a new study that you got to do of each team every week, and it is tough to keep up with that NFL pace when in your rookie year. Heck, T.J. Watt went through that when he was a rookie for the Pittsburgh Steelers back in 2017. He started out on fire, and you were like, "Whoa, like this is amazing!" But then he cooled off after a while, and you're like, "Huh?" Well, then in that second year, you saw him more used to the NFL pace, and he adjusted to it, and you saw him continue to grow from that. It's what you see out of a lot of NFL rookies. So the reason why they may not be just thrusting Dan Moore into one of the starting tackle positions yet is because they want to make sure that he can handle the NFL pace. And an offensive tackle, as you know, they're protecting Ben Roethlisberger and Najee Harris, two very important players that cannot afford to be hurt this year. They might want to play it safer with a core four in that he'll be ready to do those things. Now, again, I'm not saying that a core four has stood out and definitely said, bang, I'm your man. But this is why I say offensive tackle might be your waiver wire spot. If there's an offensive tackle you feel like is an NFL caliber guy and a little bit more physical and plays that way, maybe they look and sign him, because right now you're looking at your offensive tackles being Zach Banner, Chukwuma Okorafor, Dan Moore Jr., and Haig. Haig really hasn't shown you much. So what, if you could go get another NFL tackle, because the other thought here is, what if one of these guys go down? And then you're like, oh, snap, now you're really down a man. And Dan Moore Jr., he's not just the swing tackle anymore. He's got to fit in a spot. He's already admitted out in public he's not as comfortable with right tackle yet. And do you want Haig to be your guy? That's where I can see this coming to place. Now, another position of concern here will actually still be off-ball linebacker. My opinion, Joe Schobert, Devin Bush, going to play a ton this year. But there's 17 games in the regular season now. And that means that they're probably going to have to deal with a couple games where one of them are hurt, maybe even both of them. And I'm not saying that definitely both of them, but I'm saying they might want to get another off-ball linebacker who's better than Robert Spillane. Because Spillane, we were all excited about him last year, had a big hit on Derrick Henry, had a nice pick six on Lamar Jackson, had some good plays here and there, looked like he was fitting in the defense, but he was in a role. And now we've seen that when he's kind of isolated and the offense knows his weaknesses out there, they're picking at him. I mean, heck, the third stringers for the Panthers were picking at him. That's not good. Now, Spillane can stay on the team. He's a special teamer. He's still physical. You want him to grow from it. But you may need to go get yourself somebody else to back up Schobert and Bush in case one of them goes down, even if it's not for a whole game, if it's for a quarter. That stuff can really hurt you. So linebacker is a concern. There's another position that I think is a concern. It's cornerback, but not in the way that we've been talking about it the entire time. I'm going to get to that later in the show, though, because I want to talk to you guys about the roster cuts that happened over the weekend. Before I talk to you about those roster cuts, I got to tell you about one of our new sponsors, North One. North One is the better banking for small business owners solution, because serving small business owners is all that they do. North One allows you to manage your money from anywhere, whether you're at home or on the go. Everything you need to manage your business finances is at your fingertips. You'll never step foot in a bank branch again. In addition to the features you'd expect, like mobile check deposit, cash withdrawals, the ability to send and receive ACH and wire payments, North One is also an FDIC insured account that can save you both time and money. North One integrates with all the accounting software you already use, saving you hours of manual bookkeeping. And with North One's envelope feature, you can automatically budget and save for things like rent, payroll, taxes, and more. With North One, you'll never pay overdraft for NSF fees again, saving you hundreds of dollars per month. To get started, visit apply.northone.com/locked. Again, that's apply.northone.com/LOCKED. North One, business banking made for America. And of course, we're also sponsored by betonline.ag. It's that time of the year again, and all eyes are now turning to football as teams are back on the gridiron ready to start the season. As always, BetOnline is your number one spot for all the pro football and college football action this season. Get all the updates on odds, props, contests, including the $500,000 NFL Mega Contest and the $200,000 NFL Survivor Contest, open right now at BetOnline. Head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today and receive your 100% welcome bonus. Be sure to take advantage of their opening day super promo. That's make a bet on the Thursday, September 9th season opener between the Super Bowl champion Buccaneers and the Dallas Cowboys. And if you lose, your wager will be refunded up to $25. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports, from football, basketball, to boxing, right down to horse racing. Don't wait and take advantage of all these great offers available for the 2021 season at BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts. We're keeping it rolling here, because when we do back-to-back ad reads, we keep it rolling here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Now, we'll get back to cornerback in a minute, But I wanted to talk to you guys about the cuts that have been announced already. Now, the Steelers have trimmed it more. I believe they have 17 more players that they need to cut to make their 53-man roster. But these are the 8 players that were cut. And, we wanted to talk about who these players were, how they did, and, whether or not maybe they're practice squad guys that you want to bring back. Those names were running back Tony Brooks-James, cornerback Shakur Brown, defensive tackle TJ Carter, wide receiver Anthony Johnson, cornerback Lafayette Pitts, guard Malcolm Brigden, wide receiver Matthew Sexton, safety Lamont Wade. Now, probably the name that pops off to everyone immediately is Matthew Sexton, because let's face it, this guy was looking really good throughout training camp and preseason. He was fielding punts. He was really fast, runs a sub 4.4 speed, was making plays in training camp, made a couple really good returns in the first 3 preseason games. And then disaster struck in this final preseason game when he bobbled the snap. And I said this in my bonus episode that I put on YouTube and on our podcast channel for Saturday, just reviewing the game from Friday. But I mean, that's just how hard it is to make the NFL. Matthew Sexton ran a sub 4.4. He's a lightning in a bottle on the NFL field. He had a really good training camp, a really good couple preseason games, really good returns, and 2 muffed punts, and he's cut amongst the first 8 that go after that last preseason game. That's how hard it is to make the NFL. That's why these guys are such amazing athletes, and all the competition is fierce. And it's also why you'll watch those preseason games, because that's when you learn the stories of those guys that didn't make it, and they're still phenomenal athletes. It's just you got to be the cream of the crop to be on to even be on an NFL roster. Now, other guys that may jump out, Shakur Brown, a slot cornerback that, back in draft season, if you remember way back in March when everyone was projecting who should go where, Shakur Brown was one of those guys that people were saying, oh yeah, mid-round slot cornerback, he'll fit right in, he'll make that happen. And then he went undrafted, and the Steelers got him undrafted, and it was like, whoa, that's a steal. Wow, you got Shakur Brown, and now he's cut. Now, I will say this, Shakur Brown, I don't think he did anything poorly, but it was just a matter of you didn't make an impact as a rookie in the slot. Antoine Brooks, got cut because he was injured, or he's going to be on injuries, or they're working that out. Arthur Marlette, you didn't do anything to really, push the veteran per se, and he's the guy that's still on the roster. But Shakur Brown is a purebred slot cornerback, and you didn't see enough out of him. I expect him to be practice squad guy and to be a guy that they keep around and to see if he can grow from there. But that's just it's just a really tough spot. You only have so many opportunities in training camp and preseason to make a true mark for yourself. And if you're not being explosive and making those splash plays or making your presence felt on the field more times than not, then you're going to get pushed to the back. That's something that Mike Hilton did. I remember I was there for his 2017 training camp practices when he would fly all over the field. He'd be making tackles, making breakups, and every time he make a break, he'd say, "I'm too small, coach." And Mike Tomlin, after the 5th time hearing, he's like, "All right, Mike Hilton, we hear you. You're too small." But the fact was that he had to keep seeing him because he kept making plays. Shakur Brown just didn't get to do that this offseason or this preseason. We'll see if he gets to bounce back in his career. Other guys here, TJ Carter, a guy they signed, in the middle of March. It was kind of a nothing signing, and just the defensive line is just too stacked. I'm sorry, there's going to be a lot of that. Tony Brooks-James, an interesting running back option who, they were hoping could get some special teams, but again, no surprise there. Anthony Johnson, I thought, did well enough in these preseason games. He got open, made some good catches, was doing well in training camp practices. But again, loaded wide receiver room. What are you going to do? Matthew Sexton didn't make it. That means you're not making it. Cody White's still out there looking like he's battling for the 5th spot, but I still think that's going to Ray McLeod, even though he did have a rough Friday night. Lafayette Pitts, a former Pitt guy. Actually, crazy enough with Lafayette Pitts being his name. But him being there, no surprise there. No surprise with Malcolm Brigden at guard. And the safety option, Lamont Wade. Lamont Wade, a guy that a lot of people were excited about, Penn State guy, from the, had those local ties. But, again, Lamont Wade just didn't get to make enough impact plays. And now the safety room was one place where you could have maybe made more of an impact because there were more opportunities there. There's only 4 guys they're most likely keeping there, though, because of the other positions of need. They're really comfortable with Minka Fitzpatrick and Terrell Edmonds. Those guys have been relatively healthy for most of their careers. So not relatively healthy, they've been mostly healthy for most of their careers. So, behind them, Miles Killebrew looked like the established backup at strong safety. Trey Norwood looked like a good young free safety they could develop and work around, even though he had a rough time in the slot. But again, he didn't practice much in the slot, so not too surprised there. But Lamont Wade, just another tough position, another guy that could fight to make a practice squad spot, and maybe if emergency comes, they'll be called up back then. But you see all those cuts happen. Shakur Brown, there's something interesting about the cornerback position, because I want to get into this in the third segment more, but going into even before the first preseason game, even after the first couple preseason games, all Steelers fans have been talking about is, man, can they trade for Stephon Gilmore, Patrick Peterson, or these big name cornerbacks? I'm going to get to just in a minute here why that isn't the move, but maybe there's another type of move coming here for the Pittsburgh Steelers to add to that cornerback room. Before we do that, I got to talk to you guys about one of our newer sponsors, DirecTV Stream. Does this sound familiar? You've got one device that lets you catch the game live, another that lets you stream your favorite shows. You're watching sports highlights on your phone, and you've got your neighbor's best friends login for the good stuff. Well, I want to tell you about a simple way to get all that entertainment you love without the hassle, and a great way to finally get your TV together. It's called DirecTV Stream, and it brings your live TV and on-demand favorites together like never before, so you can watch your favorite sports, movies, and shows all in one place. That means no more juggling remotes, no need to buy another device ever again. And the best part, there's no annual contract. So get rid of the clutter and the confusion and get your TV together with DirecTV Stream. You can learn more at directtv.com. Again, that's directtv.com. Compatible device required. Content varies by package. And of course, we're also sponsored by Built Bar. If you want a healthy treat that tastes like a candy bar, Built Bar is the protein bar for you. It's the official protein bar for the U.S. track and field team, and it comes in so many different flavors. Whether you want a fruity snack like raspberry, strawberry, or orange, or something different like salted caramel, cookies and cream, Rocky Road, or my personal favorite, double chocolate, Built Bar has so many flavors to enjoy. And the best part, they're all healthy. They range from 130 to 180 calories, 17 to 18 grams of protein, but they only pack 4 to 5 grams of sugar and 4 to 5 grams of net carbs. That's a tasty and healthy snack that'll save you from eating that snack you'll regret later, and stay on task with anyone's diet. Order today and get your favorite flavor delivered right to your door by going to built.com and use the promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off your next order. Again, that's promo code LOCKED15, LOCKED15, all capital letters, all one word, for 15% off at built.com. And like I said, when we do back-to-back ad reads, we keep it rolling here in the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let's get back to this cornerback position, because I teased this in both segments. I wanted to get to the final segment here about the cornerback spot. Now, again, going into this preseason with Steven Nelson gone and Mike Hilton gone, everyone's like, oh, the Steelers, you got to go get another cornerback somewhere, because Cam Sutton, maybe you want him in the slot, but I think the Steelers are a little bit more comfortable with their depth than most people might think. And they kind of alluded to this in minicamp when they were saying, there's some positions that we're a little deeper than people give us credit for. And I think that they were maybe hinting at cornerback. Now, I will say this, through the first couple weeks of training camp, I was like, man, cornerback, you kidding me? Because, I'm all for James Pierre, Cam Sutton, Joe Hayden, but Justin Lane was not looking good. You didn't know what you had in Antoine Brooks because he was hurt. Arthur Marlette, you weren't sure what was going on with him. You were still evaluating him. And then you had like Mark Gilbert, who, good job for what you did. But again, you have very few known commodities in that cornerback room. But I will say this, I do think that Cameron Sutton and James Pierre have established themselves as your 2 and 3 options on the field next to Joe Hayden at the cornerback spot. And I do think that they'll see if Arthur Marlette, he had an ankle injury. He's supposed to come back. Mike Tomlin said last week, at the start of their week of practice, that he was day-to-day with his injury. We'll see if that holds up. But if he is, I can see Sutton taking a lot more snaps in the slot, and Pierre lining up outside and getting the start at the outside cornerback position whenever they go nickel. So that's something there. I will also say Justin Lane really came on strong, and I've said this, for the past couple weeks, he's looked better and better and better. I thought in those last 2 preseason games, good job, Justin Lane. Not immaculate, not game changer, not start him right now. But hey, man, you showed me what you need. What you showed me, you improved. That you had some rough couple days, and I talked about this in the Wally Carter Steelers podcast and DK Pittsburgh Sports. But one thing that I often look for in players is when you have a rough day, and this is something Mike Tomlin and all coaches look for, because I've heard them talk about this. But when you have a rough day, when the dirt's kicked in your face, you lose battles, and you're embarrassed, how do you respond from that? Do you curl up in a ball? Do you respond with it, or do you go out there and you go back to reading your keys and making sure you're doing your assignment to the best of your ability and still firing off at 100%, even if you might lose the next play? I thought Justin Lane did that, and that's why they're comfortable with him there. He also contributes on special teams. They're fine with that. Now, where I still see there being a need. Again, back to this waiver wire situation. Offensive tackle, off-ball linebacker, I think are bigger needs right now. But where cornerback could still be an option is if they see a better slot option than Arthur Maulet. If the guy gets cut and you're like, whoa, we liked that guy and we never got a chance at him, that might be the move here. But I don't see any big move coming at cornerback, as far as trading to get that guy over the next couple of weeks. Now, of course, we're still waiting to hear about the TJ Watt extension. It should be any day now, from what we've heard, from according to Jerry Dulac and other people that have reported it. But we'll see what that happens and what the money is after that and what money the Steelers want to spend. But the bottom line is cornerback. If you're going to hit this waiver wire cheap and in the slot, I'm still saying offensive tackle, linebacker might be top priorities, but they need to be looking around because they're in a position where if Cam Sutton goes down, the slot is a problem. And then you start to wonder, okay, who do we line up there? Because Trey Nowhere to Get didn't look too good there. If Arthur Maulet's down and Cam Sutton's down, that's a tight spot because then that slot cornerback becomes a major position of need. I know that they were moving Joe Schobert out to help out in that slot area when there was a tight end there, but you don't want him doing against receivers. So if there's a waiver move to go get a cornerback, I perceive it will be a slot option, not an outside guy, not a top tier guy, just a cheaper guy that can be like, hey, you know what? You got NFL experience. We know you have that NFL pedigree. We're putting you here, plug and play. Let's rock. And then maybe they'll see when Antoine Brooks gets healthy again, if he can play that position the way that they were hoping he would. Because again, he was the front runner for that position. And it looked like they were extremely deep at slot because you had Antoine Brooks, then Arthur Maulet, then you had Cameron Sutton to play around with if all went worse. So that's my situation here. But again, watch out for the waiver wire. I know that the Steelers are making cuts, but part of those cuts might be extended by if they sign a guy that another team cuts and they make moves that way. So stay tuned. We'll be keeping you up to date with those cuts as they get announced here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'll be at Steelers practice on Monday, so do stay tuned with my Twitter account at Carter Critiques, where I tweet out things that I see here and get to know. So if you want to keep up with that feed, keep up with that there. You can also follow me on Instagram at Carter Critiques. If you're enjoying the show, please subscribe to us. We're on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Odyssey, and of course YouTube. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Leave us a 5-star rating with a positive comment on Apple Podcasts, and you get a special shout out at the end of the show. Thanks again for watching/listening to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Be back in your ears tomorrow with more on your Pittsburgh Steelers.
NFL teams are trimming down while the SEC lays down the law. Here's what our local experts are locked on today. Lots of cuts around the NFL today, including Patriots quarterback and former MVP Cam Newton. Make sure you find your favorite Locked On NFL Team podcast today and follow them on Twitter for the latest roster updates. COVID-related absences continue to hamper NFL teams' preseason preparations. The Indianapolis Colts are missing quarterback Carson Wentz, Pro Bowl center Ryan Kelly, and receiver Zach Pascal, who all landed on the reserve COVID-19 list. Our local expert in Indy, Evan Sidery, tells you who will step up in their place today on Locked On Colts. And in college football, the SEC has instituted a forfeiture policy for teams that can't play because of COVID-19. Who will it impact most? The answer is on the Locked On Today podcast. All the sports news you need in under 20 minutes. Follow Locked On today, wherever you get your podcast. Local experts on the biggest stories. It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.